Have you ever felt like you were trying to hold on to a ghost? You reach out, and they slip right through your fingers. You step back exhausted, and suddenly there they are, throwing you just enough crumbs to keep you starving, but alive. Loving an avoidant is like trying to read a beautiful novel in absolute darkness. You know the depth is there, but the words are entirely hidden. Society has lied to you about what love looks like. We expect loud declarations and emotional transparency, but to an avoidant, love does not look like a fairy tale. It looks like a trap. It is an active, terrifying psychological threat. When they truly fall for you, they do not promise you forever. Instead, their central nervous system goes into a quiet, agonizing panic. You sit there drained, analyzing every delayed text and silent car ride, asking, do they even care, or am I delusional? You are desperately looking for the word love, but you are looking in the wrong dictionary. Avoidants possess their own distinct language, forged in the cold rooms of their childhood, and built on emotional neglect, a vocabulary entirely dedicated to one primal goal, self-preservation. They speak in codes, in logistics, in tiny micro-shifts of their rigid boundaries. They will never say, I cannot live without you. To a traumatized brain, that is emotional suicide. It is handing you a loaded weapon and praying you do not pull the trigger. Instead, they say things that sound mundane, clinical, even dismissive. But if you understand the neuroscience behind their thick walls, you will realize something profound. Their most confusing detached comments are actually the ultimate proof of their internal surrender. Today we decode this hidden language. We will look at the exact phrases they use when their walls are silently crumbling, the very specific things they say when they are deeply, irreversibly in love with you. A harsh warning before we begin. This translation is not here to give you false hope. Empathy should never become a bridge to your own destruction. This is simply the brutal truth about how a heavily guarded brain processes affection. So, listen closely, because the exact words you thought meant they were pulling away might actually be the definitive proof that they are terrified of how desperately they want you to stay. Let us start with the biology of fear. To truly understand an avoidant, you must look deep inside their brain, specifically at the amygdala. It is your brain's primal alarm system. Its only job is to keep you alive. For an empath, falling in love is soothing. When you get close to someone, your brain floods with oxytocin, the bonding hormone. Your nervous system relaxes. You feel safe. You feel like you are finally home. But for the avoidant, the exact opposite happens. Biologically, the exact opposite. When they feel deepening attachment, their brain does not release oxytocin. Instead, their amygdala violently strikes the alarm bell. Danger. Vulnerability detected. Shields up. Why? Because in childhood, connection was not a safe place. It meant suffocation, control, or abandonment. To survive, their brain wired itself to believe a tragic lie. Relying on someone else will destroy me. Today, when they realize they actually care if you leave, their brain perceives your love as a physical threat. This creates an invisible chemical war. They genuinely want you, but the moment they lean into your warmth, their brain aggressively dumps cortisol, the stress hormone, into their bloodstream. It is a silent fight or flight response, not because you did something wrong, but simply because you got too close. Closeness equals pain. Imagine standing on the edge of a dizzying cliff, heart pounding, palms sweating, terrified of falling. That is what emotional intimacy feels like to an avoidant. Your love is the cliff, and the deeper they fall, the more terrifying that cliff becomes. This is the fundamental tragedy. The very thing they desperately want is what their nervous system actively fights to reject. This is why, after a beautiful, vulnerable weekend together, they suddenly go ice cold. They pull away. You sit there heartbroken, thinking it was all a lie. But the brutal truth, their nervous system just crashed. They are drowning in cortisol, pulling away simply to regulate their racing heartbeat. They distance themselves, not because they feel nothing, but because they suddenly felt everything. And it terrified them. Understanding this biological warfare is the master key. It is the only way to decode the bizarre robotic language they use when they are trying to love you, without feeling like they are going to die in the process. If their brain actively fights vulnerability, how do they show they care? How does an avoidant say, I love you, when the phrase is a trap? They do not use poetry or grand declarations. Instead, they use the language of logistics. Imagine waiting for a text that says, "I miss you." Instead, your phone lights up with, "Did you get that oil change? The weather is dropping. Check your tire pressure." Your heart sinks. You feel like you are dating a mechanic. It feels cold, clinical. You think, "I want your heart," and you are talking about tire pressure. But you are completely mistranslating the message. To an avoidant, raw emotion is a dangerous minefield. It cannot be easily fixed. But logistics are safe, controllable. There is absolutely no emotional ambiguity in an oil change. Survival is everything to them. They have built an impenetrable fortress of self-sufficiency because asking for help always led to disappointment. So, when this guarded person steps out of their fortress and starts managing your practical problems, when they fix your laptop or calculate your commute, they are doing something incredibly profound. They are quietly extending their protective survival bubble to include you. This is their ultimate love language, devotion completely stripped of emotional risk. When they ask, "Did you eat today?" they are actually saying, "Your well-being is now tied to my peace of mind." When they check your car, they are saying, "I cannot bear the thought of you in danger." For an empath, love is emotional fusion. For an avoidant, love is survival and utility. They cannot hand you their bleeding heart. It is far too dangerous. Instead, they give you their competence, their hypervigilance. They are actively trying to make your life safer, because to their trauma-adapted brain, keeping you safe in the physical world is the closest they can possibly get to holding you safely in their heart. Words are incredibly dangerous things to an avoidant. To an empath, words of affection are a bridge. You say, "I love you," to build a shared reality, to make the other person feel safe. But to the avoidant brain, words are not a bridge. They are a binding, terrifying contract. Verbalizing a feeling feels like closing the only exit door in a burning building. Once spoken, they feel trapped. They feel you will eventually consume their autonomy entirely. So, how do they express terrifying affection? They use a psychological safety net, plausible deniability. They speak in the language of the hypothetical. Listen closely to their compliments. They rarely sound like compliments. They sound like sarcastic observations. You share an intimate evening. You say, "I love spending time with you." You wait for it. Instead, they smirk and say, "Yeah, you are not the worst person to be around." To your empathetic heart, this feels like a dismissive slap in the face. But you are missing the hidden weight of what just happened. By framing affection as a negative, they have successfully bypassed their own amygdala. They tricked their internal alarm system. It is a joke, not a formal declaration of surrender. If you reject them, their ego is protected. They can simply say, "Relax, I was just joking." They constantly test the waters with these hypothetical confessions. They might say, "If we are still talking next year, maybe we should take a trip." Notice the word, if. They did not say, "I want to go with you." That is a terrifying commitment. That tiny two-letter word is the steel door protecting their fragile inner child. It keeps the future conditional. But here is the brutal truth. An avoidant does not casually insert you into their future, even hypothetically. Their survival strategy is built on the certainty of being alone. They daydream about isolation, not shared futures. So, when they say, "If we ever got an apartment together, we would need 2 bathrooms," they are not making idle conversation. They are actively revealing a secret, terrifying blueprint. They have already imagined a future with you. They have done the mental math of merging their protected life with yours. They are testing you to see if a shared future terrifies you as much as it terrifies them. When an avoidant jokes about not hating you or talks about a conditional future, they are handing you their heart, wrapped in thick layers of sarcasm and conditional clauses, desperately hoping you are patient enough to unwrap it, without ever forcing them to admit they gave it to you in the first place. Let us talk about the whiplash, the violent emotional whiplash that leaves you entirely broken. You know the scenario. You just experienced the most magical connected weekend of your relationship. The heavy walls came down. For the first time, you felt the warmth. As an empath, your heart soared. You thought, "We finally made it. The hardest part is over." But then, Monday morning arrives, and the freeze happens. Their texts become incredibly short. The warmth is gone, replaced by solid ice. And then they deliver the sentence that shatters your reality, "I need some space." Or maybe they just vanish into their work. Anything. To create immediate massive distance. You stand in the ruins of your perfect weekend paralyzed. You spiral into self-blame. You ask, what did I do wrong? Was it all a lie? Hear me very clearly. It was not a lie. The intimacy was incredibly real, and that is exactly the problem. It was too real. You are witnessing a severe psychological phenomenon, a vulnerability hangover. For one beautiful weekend, they did something entirely unnatural to their survival programming. They lowered their weapons. But the avoidant nervous system operates on a terrifying pendulum. The further they swing into deep connection, the more violently they swing back into extreme isolation. The moment intimacy ends, their amygdala wakes up and screams, "What did you do? You are completely exposed." The panic sets in. It is a biological reflex. So, when they say, "I need space," your empathetic brain translates it as, "I do not want you anymore." But the brutal translation of "I need space" is actually this: "My nervous system is on fire. I am suffocating under my own exposed feelings for you. I must retreat immediately. I must rebuild my walls just to prove I can still survive on my own." They are not pushing you away because they feel nothing. They are pushing you away because they just felt everything. The connection breached their thickest armor. The sudden exposure to that much raw love is blinding to someone who has lived in the dark. This is the agonizing paradox. The exact moment they genuinely fall in love with you is the exact moment they run away from you. Their retreat is not a rejection. It is a desperate attempt to regulate their overloaded nervous system. It is the ultimate proof that you cracked the vault. But you must ask yourself, how many times are you willing to watch them run from the love they desperately need before your own heart finally gives out? Let us talk about the most confusing, agonizing way an avoidant shows their love. Let us talk about criticism. If you are an empath, your definition of love is unconditional acceptance. You embrace their flaws. You want to be a safe haven. But with an avoidant, the closer you get, the more their safe haven feels like an interrogation room. Suddenly they notice everything. They comment on your sleep schedule. They question your diet. They criticize how you manage finances or even how you load the dishwasher. As an empath, this shatters you. You feel constantly evaluated. You feel like a project they are trying to fix. You think, they do not even like me. But once again, you are applying a secure translation to a traumatized language. When an avoidant does not care about you, they simply do not care. They are masters of detachment. You could ruin your life and they would simply walk away entirely unaffected. But when they start to fall in love, something terrifying happens. You are no longer a separate entity. You have entered their highly guarded internal ecosystem. To the hypervigilant avoidant brain, anything important is a potential risk that must be managed. Because they have attached to you, your well-being is suddenly tied to their own psychological safety. If you fail, it impacts them. So their protective instincts kick into absolute overdrive. They do not possess the vocabulary to say, "I am terrified of something bad happening to you." Instead, their fear mutates. It transforms into micromanagement. This relentless nitpicking is actually a severely distorted form of profound affection. When they say, "Why are you eating that?" they are aggressively trying to eliminate a threat to your health. When they say, "You need to organize your schedule," they are desperately trying to optimize your life so you do not burn out. They are trying to make you bulletproof. They are fixing your vulnerabilities before the harsh world can exploit them. Because in childhood, nobody protected them. They had to become perfect to survive. Now they are projecting that exact survival strategy onto you. To the avoidant, love is a high-stakes risk assessment. If they are actively trying to improve your life, even if it sounds harsh or cold, it means they are profoundly invested in your future. They criticize you because you are finally precious enough to protect. Let us talk about the concept of tomorrow. To an empath or a securely attached person, planning the future is the ultimate expression of love. You want certainty. You want to sit down, hold their hand, and talk about where you will live, what kind of dog you will adopt, or where you will travel next year. You want labels. You want a 5-year plan. You want to know with absolute clarity that they are choosing you, not just for today, but for all the tomorrows. But to the heavily guarded, dismissive avoidant, the future is a terrifying place. To their nervous system, a plan is not a promise. A plan is a cage. Committing to a future means voluntarily surrendering their autonomy. It means making a promise they are terrified they might not be able to keep. It means legally binding their fragile emotional state to another human being. So they live strictly in the present tense. They take things one day at a time. They vehemently refuse to put a label on the relationship. They dodge any conversation that starts with the words, "Where is this going?" They do this to keep the exit door wide open, just in case. But the human brain is a highly complex, predictive machine. When an avoidant truly deeply falls in love with you, a profound war breaks out between their conscious fears and their subconscious reality. Consciously, they are telling themselves, "I am independent. I am not tied down. I can leave whenever I want." But subconsciously, their brain has already begun the terrifying process of integrating you into their permanent survival map. Their neural pathways are quietly rewiring. Their internal predictive coding, the way their brain anticipates the world, starts automatically factoring in your existence. And because their subconscious is doing this without their permission, it begins to leak out. It leaks out in what psychologists call accidental future casting. They will never sit you down and declare a lifelong commitment. Their ego will not allow it. But listen closely to the careless throwaway comments they make on a random Tuesday afternoon. You might be driving in the car and they casually point out the window and say, "When they finish building that new museum next winter, we should go check it out." Or maybe it is the middle of spring and they say, "There is a band I really like playing in October. I am going to buy us tickets." To your empathetic heart, a concert ticket 6 months from now might seem like a painfully small crumb. You might think, "I want a ring. I want you to ask me to move in, and you are offering me a concert ticket." But you are entirely missing the monumental neurological leap that just took place. For an avoidant to project themselves 6 months into the future and still picture you standing right next to them is a massive, earth-shattering internal surrender. They did not say, "I might go." They did not say, "if we are still hanging out." They used the most terrifying, dangerous word in their entire vocabulary. They said, "we." That tiny 2-letter pronoun is an absolute nightmare for hyper-independence. "We" implies a merged identity. "We" implies a shared path. "We" means they have entirely dropped the delusion that they are walking through this life alone. When they accidentally future cast, when they mention a holiday next year, or a movie coming out next summer, or even just say, "Next time we come to this restaurant, we should try the steak." Their subconscious mind is boldly betraying their conscious defenses. They are accidentally confessing that they cannot actually picture their life without you in it anymore. They have stopped looking at the exit door. They have secretly, quietly unpacked their bags. They are terrified of the cage. Yes, but their brain has already decided that they would rather be in the cage with you than be free and completely alone without you. Let us talk about the armor, the heavy, impenetrable, suffocating iron suit of hyper-independence. If you are a deeply empathetic, securely loving person, you thrive on interdependency. You love being needed. When you are struggling, you reach out. You lean on your partner. And when your partner is struggling, you want them to lean on you. To you, mutual reliance is the very fabric of intimacy. It is how you weave two lives together. But to the avoidant, relying on another human being is not intimacy. It is a fatal, catastrophic weakness. You must understand how this hyper-independence was forged. It was not born out of arrogance. It was not born out of pride. It was born out of absolute, heartbreaking necessity. When they were children, they learned a brutal lesson about the world. They learned that when they cried, no one came. When they needed help, they were viewed as a burden. When they reached out for a hand, they grabbed empty air. To survive that profound emotional abandonment, their developing brain made a permanent, non-negotiable vow. I will never ever need anyone again. I will do it myself. I will survive on my own. Because if I only rely on myself, I can never be disappointed. This becomes their entire identity. They pay their own bills. They fix their own problems. They suffer their own illnesses in absolute agonizing silence. They build a sovereign, untouchable state of one. So what happens when this fiercely independent, heavily guarded person actually falls in love with you? They do something that completely betrays their core survival programming. They ask you for a favor. It will not be a massive dramatic plea for help. It will be something incredibly small, something so mundane, you might completely miss the earth-shattering psychological significance of the moment. They might be fixing something in the house, and they look at you and say, "Can you hold this for me?" They might be dealing with a frustrating work email, and they say, "Can you read this over and tell me what you think?" Or, In the rarest, most vulnerable scenario of all, they might be lying in bed terribly sick fighting a fever, and they send you a quiet, hesitant text that says, "Could you possibly pick up some medicine for me on your way over?" To a normal person, asking for cold medicine is just a practical request. You would not even think twice about it. But to the severely avoidant brain, that text message took an agonizing amount of physical and emotional effort to type. Before they hit send, their nervous system was screaming at them. Their amygdala was flashing red. Their internal voice was whispering, "Do not do this. Do not ask for help. What if they say no? What if they act annoyed? What if they use this against you later? You are exposing your throat. You are giving them power." In the avoidant mind, accepting help means accumulating debt. And emotional debt is the ultimate loss of control. If they owe you, they are trapped. So when they look at you and they intentionally voluntarily ask for your assistance, they are doing something completely revolutionary. They are entirely dropping the hyper-independence mask. They are intentionally stepping out of their heavily fortified bunker, standing completely unarmed in the open, and saying, "I am choosing to let you see my weakness. I am choosing to let you carry a tiny piece of my burden." They are testing the terrifying waters of interdependency. They are running an experiment to see if the world has changed. They are asking, "If I need you, will you actually be there, or will you drop me just like everyone else did in my past?" When an avoidant asks you to help them, they are not just asking for a favor. They are surrendering their ego. They are silencing their trauma. They are quietly, desperately confessing that they are finally exhausted from carrying the weight of their entire world alone, and they trust you enough to let you help them put it down. Let us talk about the shadow, the darkest, most heavily guarded corners of the human mind. If you are an empath, you understand the healing power of vulnerability. When you share your deepest insecurities, your failures, or your childhood wounds with a partner, you are building a bridge of intimacy. You believe that by showing your broken pieces, you will be met with compassion. You believe that love is the ultimate antidote to shame. But for an avoidant, shame is not something that can be healed by love. To the avoidant brain, shame is a terminal diagnosis. Deep within their subconscious, beneath the thick armor of hyper-independence and competence, an avoidant carries a terrifying, deeply rooted core wound. A wound called toxic shame. They do not just feel that they made a mistake in the past. They believe on a cellular level that they are the mistake. They carry a silent, agonizing conviction that if anyone were to ever look past their perfect, capable exterior, if anyone were to see their actual flawed, messy, traumatized, true self, that person would immediately be disgusted, and that person would leave. Because in their formative years, love was highly conditional. They were only praised when they were quiet. They were only valued when they achieved something. Their raw, unfiltered emotions were treated as an inconvenience. So they learned to take their darkness, their fears, and their failures and lock them away in a vault. They constructed a flawless mask just to survive the world. But what happens when they actually start falling in love with you? What happens when your persistent warmth finally starts melting the edges of that vault? A terrifying psychological crisis occurs. Their brain realizes that you are falling in love with the mask, and the imposter syndrome becomes absolutely unbearable. Their amygdala begins to panic. It whispers to them, they do not love you. They love the version of you that never makes mistakes. If they see the real you, the broken you, they will abandon you. You need to push them away before they figure it out. And this is when they do something incredibly jarring. They will expose their shadow. It will not look like a dramatic movie scene. They will not break down sobbing in your arms. In fact, it will likely happen in the most casual, detached way possible. You might be driving late at night, staring at the road, and out of nowhere, in a completely monotone voice, they will tell you about a time they failed miserably. They will tell you about a profound source of shame, a terrible financial mistake, a moment they were deeply humiliated. Or, in the rarest of instances, they will drop a casual, devastating detail about the emotional neglect they suffered in their childhood. They will deliver this information staring straight ahead, looking anywhere but at you. They are doing this on purpose. This is not a bonding exercise. This is a severe, high-stakes psychological stress test. They are deliberately pulling out the ugliest, most unlovable parts of themselves, placing them directly on the table between you, and waiting for you to flinch. They are testing you. They are bracing for the rejection they believe is inevitable. They are giving you the perfect excuse to walk away, hoping to control the narrative of the breakup before you can blindside them with it later. They are practically saying, "Here is the monster. Run away now while it still hurts a little less." But I need you to understand the monumental significance of this moment. To an avoidant, information is ammunition. They have spent their entire lives making sure nobody has the ammunition to destroy them. So, when they voluntarily hand you their deepest shame, when they give you the exact coordinates of their most vulnerable, unprotected wounds, they are handing you the loaded weapon. They are terrified you will use it against them, but they are giving it to you anyway. Exposing their shadow is the closest an avoidant will ever get to getting down on one knee and begging you to stay. It is their desperate, unspoken plea. They are asking, "If I show you the absolute worst of me, the parts I cannot even look at in the mirror, will you finally be the one who does not leave?" Let us talk about the things they do not say at all. Let us talk about the human body. The human mouth can lie effortlessly. The ego can construct massive, elaborate illusions to protect its pride, but the mammalian nervous system cannot lie. It does not know how. To understand an avoidant, you must first understand the intense physical toll of their existence. Their baseline physical state is a state of invisible war. They do not walk through the world relaxed. They walk through the world completely braced for impact. Their shoulders are permanently subtly tight. Their breathing is incredibly shallow, trapped high in their chest. Their muscles are quietly, continuously clenched. They are living their entire lives in a chronic low-grade state of fight or flight. Because to their primitive brain, the world is fundamentally inherently unsafe. Everyone is a potential threat. Everyone wants something from them. Everyone will eventually drain them. You, as a deeply sensitive person, pick up on this frequency immediately. When you sit next to an avoidant who has their walls up, you can physically feel the rigid, buzzing energy radiating off of them. You feel their silence. And for most of your relationship, that silence has felt incredibly heavy. It has felt like a weapon. It has felt like a cold steel door slammed directly in your face. When they freeze you out, their silence is designed to starve you. It is designed to push you as far away as possible. But when an avoidant finally irreversibly falls in love with you, a miraculous biological shift occurs. In neuroscience, there is a profound concept known as nervous system co-regulation. It is the biological phenomenon where one person's calm, grounded energy physically alters the heart rate, the blood pressure, and the brain waves of the person sitting next to them. When an avoidant truly loves you, you become their external regulator. You will not hear their love in a grand poetic speech. You will hear it in their breath. Listen very closely for the sigh. I do not mean an annoyed sigh. I do not mean a sigh of exhaustion or frustration. I mean a deep, involuntary, heavy release of trapped air. The very moment they sit down on the couch next to you, that specific sound is not just breathing. That is the sound of their vagus nerve finally activating. That is the sound of their parasympathetic nervous system violently pulling the emergency brake on their lifelong anxiety. It is their body literally signaling to their brain, the war is paused, the threat is gone, we are safe now. Watch their posture. Watch how the rigid invisible armor slowly melts. Watch how they unconsciously lean their physical weight against your shoulder. A hypervigilant brain does not surrender its physical balance. A deeply traumatized nervous system does not willingly expose its center of gravity to a stranger. If they are leaning their weight into you, their biology has entirely surrendered to your presence. And the ultimate undeniable physical confession is sleep. If an avoidant can fall asleep quickly next to you, if they can sleep deeply peacefully without tossing and turning, without keeping one ear open to the literal and metaphorical exits of the room, you have achieved the absolute impossible. To sleep next to someone is the most vulnerable act a mammal can perform. You are completely unconscious. You are entirely defenseless. For an avoidant, giving up their consciousness in the presence of another human being goes against every single survival instinct they possess. If they sleep peacefully in your arms, you have convinced a deeply terrified, hypervigilant brain that you are the ultimate safe harbor. When an avoidant loves you, the silence completely transforms. It is no longer a weapon of isolation. It is no longer a punishment. It is no longer a cold, empty room where they go to hide from your expectations. The silence becomes a sanctuary. It becomes the only place on earth where they do not have to perform, where they do not have to be hyper-competent, where they do not have to protect themselves from the crushing demands of the world. They are silently physically telling you, in a world that constantly drains me, you are the only place where I can finally close my eyes. Let us talk about the final wall, the deepest, thickest, most heavily guarded fortress inside the avoidant mind. If you have stayed this long, if you have survived the sudden freezes, the harsh logistics, the vulnerability hangovers, and the terrifying exposure of their shadow, you are standing at the very center of their psychological labyrinth. And at the center of an avoidant, there is not a monster. There is not a cold, unfeeling robot. There is only a deeply terrified, deeply convinced child, waiting for the other shoe to drop. You must understand the fundamental law of their universe. The avoidant brain operates on one massive, undeniable cognitive bias everyone leaves. It is not a question of if, it is only a question of when. Every single defense mechanism we have talked about today, the pulling away the criticism, the sarcasm, the hyper-independence, was designed to do one thing. It was designed to accelerate the inevitable. They push you to the absolute brink, desperately trying to prove their own tragic hypothesis right. They want you to leave on their terms, so they do not have to be blindsided when you eventually give up. They build the wall high, and they wait for you to walk away, just like everyone else did. But what happens when you do not? What happens when you stand firmly outside that wall, calm, grounded, refusing to take their trauma personally, and you simply stay? An absolute psychological earthquake occurs. You create massive cognitive dissonance inside their brain. Their amygdala is screaming that you are a threat, that you are going to abandon them. But their prefrontal cortex is looking at the undeniable data of your consistent, unwavering presence. You did not punish them for their silence. You did not run from their shadow. You did not demand they change their entire nature overnight. And slowly, agonizingly, their confirmation bias begins to shatter. The neural pathways of their lifelong trauma begin to rewrite themselves in real time. And this is when they will deliver the ultimate confession. It will not sound like a romance novel. It will not be a grand proposal under the stars. In fact, it might sound incredibly heavy. It might sound almost like an apology. They will look at you usually in a very quiet, very still moment, and they will say, "Thank you for being so patient with me." Or perhaps, "I know I am not easy to deal with. Thank you for not giving up." Or simply, "Thank you for still being here." To a securely attached person or an empath who craves passionate declarations of everlasting love, this might sound entirely underwhelming. It might even sound a little pathetic. You might think, "Is that it? Am I just a symbol of patience to you? I want you to be wildly obsessed with me, not just grateful that I tolerate you." But you are entirely missing the profound, devastating weight of those words. For an avoidant to say, "Thank you for staying," they have to admit something terrifying. They have to admit that they were secretly, desperately terrified that you would leave. They have to admit that their hyper-independence was a total failure, because despite all their armor, despite all their self-reliance, they actually needed you to stay. They needed your mercy. They needed your grace. They are dropping the delusion that they do not need anyone. This phrase is the absolute collapse of their ego. It is the white flag of surrender waving over the ruins of their trauma. When they acknowledge your patience, when they validate the immense effort it takes to love them, they are finally seeing you. They are stepping out of their own survival mode, long enough to recognize the sacrifices you have made for their heart. They are not just saying thank you. They are saying, "You are the first person in my entire life who did not confirm my deepest, darkest fear. You are the anomaly. You are the miracle that my nervous system never thought it would find." In the language of the avoidant, "Thank you for not walking away," is the loudest, most desperate, most deeply profound "I love you" that their traumatized brain will ever be capable of speaking. We have just walked through the absolute darkest, most complex corridors of the avoidant mind. We have decoded the terrifying silence. We have translated the cold language of logistics. We have exposed the agonizing biological war happening deep inside their nervous system. And now, you know the truth. You know that when they suddenly pull away, it is not because they feel nothing. It is because they are entirely biologically overwhelmed by the sheer terror of feeling everything. You know that their bizarre, clinical, highly guarded behaviors are actually the desperate, invisible fingerprints of a deeply traumatized love. They do love you, in their own shattered, fiercely protective way, They absolutely love you. But here is where I must look you directly in the eyes and be brutally unapologetically honest with you. Just because their love is deeply real does not mean it is deeply healthy for you. Just because their emotional distance is a valid trauma response, it does not mean you are obligated to set your own heart on fire just to keep their nervous system warm. Understanding their neuroscience is incredibly powerful. It gives you clarity. Empathy is a beautiful, rare, and deeply human gift. But empathy must never become a suicide pact for your own mental health. You cannot love the avoidance out of someone. You cannot heal their childhood wounds by simply tolerating their emotional starvation. You cannot pour your endless golden empathy into a cup that has a massive unhealed hole at the bottom and expect to ever feel full yourself. You have to ask yourself a very painful, very necessary question today. Are you truly willing to spend the rest of your life translating breadcrumbs? Are you willing to constantly abandon your own entirely valid need for loud, verbal, consistent affection just to make sure their highly dysregulated nervous system feels safe? You are not a rehabilitation center for emotionally unavailable adults. You are not a psychological translator. You are a human being. And you deserve to be loved in a language that you can actually understand. You deserve a love that does not require a survival manual. You deserve a love that feels like a warm, stable home, not a high-stakes, agonizing hostage negotiation. If you choose to stay with your avoidant partner, do it with your eyes wide open. Do it knowing exactly what their love looks like, except that it may never ever look the way